hear it, it'll be on the YouTube sites, courtesy of Rabbi Portnoy. So I'll do that in a minute, just after I mute everyone. So those of you who are, one second, those who are not yet muted, if you can please mute yourselves. I'm going to try and do this without muting myself. But yes, if everyone can please mute, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. And we're going to start recording as of now. I just need to message Rabbi Portnoy. Rabbi Portnoy, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you just allow me to record, please?
Yeah, you can do everything, and it's already recording.
It's already recording. Okay, very good. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to almost Erev Chanuka Tor Shema Shir, the enduring inspiration of the Chanuka lights. And we'll go straight away into source number one. Very famous phrase that we all know from Hanera Salolu. Hanera Salolu Kodesh Hem ve'ein lonu reshus lishtamesh bohem elo lirei son bilvad. These lights are holy, and we are not permitted to make any other use of them except to look at them. First of all, Hanera Salolu, just in terms of research, which I haven't even included in the shir at the moment, is an ancient text, goes back to the days of the Rishonim. And according to some Meforshim, till Lirei Son Bilvad, there are supposed to be 36 words, which correspond to the total of 36 Chanukah lights which are lit during the course of Chanukah. Number Lamed Vov is significant as far as Chanukah is concerned. I want to start by reading you a section from one of my favorite books, Generation to Generation, of Rabbi Twersky. Those who've been listening to my shurim for a number of years will have many times heard me quote from Rabbi Twersky, and more often than not, it is from this wonderful book. So this actually set me thinking on the track of our shir for today. And Rabbi Twersky says in the chunk at the bottom of page 1, in source 1, I remember that as small children, when we lit the Chanukah candles, mother would tell us that when she was a child of 5, she stood near her grandfather, the first Rebbe of Bobov, when he kindled the Chanukah menorah. Great-grandfather would sit in front of the glowing wicks, immersed in profound meditation. Mother related that she asked him, Zaidi, what are you thinking of now? Great-grandfather turned to the child and said, I am praying that you have good children. A few moments later, mother again interrupted the meditation. Zaidi, she asked, what are you thinking of now? This time the response was, I am praying that your children have good children. At the age of 5, mother was commissioned with a task. Great-grandfather died soon afterward, but had charged the child with a duty. Mother's recollection of this incident obviously indicated that this memory had never left her. I was not much older than 5 when mother conveyed this memory and message to me, and I transmitted it to my children when they were of that age. Our sages tell us that prayer alone can only accomplish half the task, and that man's effort must complete the remainder. But the Zaidi's prayer was more than a supplication to God. It was also a message to mother, then a child of 5, that there were expectations of her. I find that little section absolutely inspirational, because it gives a whole new level of meaning to lighting the Chanukah lights, to the inspiration that we experience when those lights are lit, and the opportunity, as I've put it in source number 1, not only are these lights holy, but they are full of potential. Rabbi Sachs, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, how painful it is to say, append those letters, those words after his name, relates that Chanukah was an indication of a spiritual victory bigger and better even than the physical victory. And that as the years went by, it became more and more evident that the Hashmonaim didn't merely secure the physical well-being of Am Yisrael, but the lotion of chinuch, of education, which is connected to Chanukah. The expression of rededication is there. And in gazing on the Chanukah lights, and that's what the Shir is going to be about, drawing out the inspiration from these Chanukah lights, understanding the deeper meaning behind the lights of Chanukah and how its inspiration is to endure. So let's turn now on to page 2, and we'll see a quote there. Some of these quotations are teaching us themes about Chanukah with which you're already very familiar, but putting them into a particular context from the original sources, which is extremely powerful. Omar of Zera, this is a Gemara in Shabbos Chaf Aleph from the base, and for those of you who are familiar with this, there is no Masechtas Chanukah. For Purim, we have Maseches Megillah. Chanukah is taught to us in 3 or 4 blat, even less, in Gemara Shabbos. And this is one of the quotes from that Gemara. Omar of Zera Morav, Psilo sushmanim she'omru chachom ein madlikim bein b'Shabbos, madlika bein b'Chanukah, bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos. Says Rav Zera in the name of Rav, those wicks and oils about which the sages said we may not kindle them, use them for kindling on Shabbos, we may do so on Chanukah. Now, just to put it into context a little bit, the Gemara tells us in Shabbos that there is an issue. By the way, if anyone hasn't got the source sheets, they should be available in the chat. I think Rabbi Portner's put them there for us. So if you look in the chat, if you don't have the sources, which we did set out yesterday, in the chat, you should be able to find the sources. If not, I'm sure Rabbi Portner will put them there shortly for our benefit. But just go back now to the source sheet once again on page 2, source number 2. Says Rav Zera in the name of Rav, those wicks and oils which you cannot use, essentially you cannot use for Shabbos, you may use them for Chanukah. Now, why can't you use certain wicks or oils for the Shabbos lights? Because the Shabbos lights we can have benefit from. And if you use an inferior quality wick or oil, the lights may splutter or sputter, and you will come to adjust the light on Shabbos. And because of that, the sages said that apart from the fact that it's covered for Shabbos to use the best quality wicks and oil that you can, it's also on a practical level mandated in order to ensure that you won't come to tilt or adjust the flame on Shabbos, which could well be, probably would be an Issa Doraisa, a Torah prohibition. So you can use inferior quality wicks and oil for Chanukah, bein b'chol, bein b'Shabbos, whether it's on a weekday, whether it's on Shabbos. Rabbi Yirmiyah, my time at the Rav, said, Rabbi Yirmiyah, what's the reasoning of Rav that you may use these inferior quality wicks and oils if you have no choice on Chanukah? So Kosova Kovsa in Zokukla, Rav held that if the Chanukah lights go out, you've lit them to the best of your ability, you've prepared them correctly, and they go out, the halacha is that you're not required to subsequently rekindle them. You don't need to attend to them to rekindle them. And the second point, which is very central to the whole shir and theme of Chanukah lights, you're not allowed to have benefit from the Chanukah lights. As Rashi explains there, and this is our first bit of extra insight into why one may not have benefit from the Chanukah lights. Also, lishtamish la'ori, not allowed to have benefit from the light. Sheyehi nikar shu ner mitzvah. It should be recognizable, it should be clear that this light that you've kindled is a light which is designated for the purpose of the mitzvah. Therefore, there's no concern that you may come to adjust it on Shabbos because you're not allowed to read by it. You're not allowed to have benefit from it. So if you've got a light which is there just simply for the mitzvah, you're not allowed to have benefit from it, you're not going to come to adjust it on Shabbos, and therefore both on weekday and on Shabbos, it's permitted to use, it's not advisable necessary for the honor of the mitzvah, you should use best quality olive oil ideally, because that's the oil with which the miracle occurred, but you should use the best quality oil and wicks. But if you can't manage to do so, you can use inferior quality oil and wicks, as the Gemara has explained. In source number 3, we see the concept of the shamas coming into play. And this is based upon that which we learned in source number 2. The light of the Chanuka menorah is uniquely dedicated, specifically designated for the purpose of the mitzvah. Amar Rava says, Rava therefore tzorich ne'acheres lishtamish la'oira. You need another light, so that if you will come to use the lights of the menorah, you won't be benefiting from the Chanuka lights, but you'll be benefiting from the additional shamas light, which doesn't have kedusha, doesn't have sanctity attached to it. The iyaka madura, but if you're in a room in days gone by where you've got an open fire burning away in the grate, which is casting its own light, leit sorich, then you don't require shamas, because when you come into the room, you'll be using as much, if not more, the light of the fire rather than the light of the menorah. The iodam choshefu, but if the person is one of high status and standing, even though there may be a fire burning merrily in the grate, it's insufficient. You require another candle, you require a shamas. Rashi explains, why for an odom choshev, a person of high standing and status, do you require a shamas, even if you've got a fire burning away? Because lasis hekeladova, we need to have the Chanuka lights recognized, clearly designated as being specifically for the mitzvah. The iyodam choshefu, and if it's a person of status, we're talking about she'eino rogel ishtamish l'hamadira, who doesn't use a fire to read by, who goes and reads by the fire. The fire is burning in the hearth to provide warmth, not to provide illumination. And since a person of high standing wouldn't use the firelight to read by, you require another light in the menorah, you require the shamas there again, because if you do not have it there, you don't have clarity that one is not benefiting from the light of the menorah. So the first two sources here have made clear to us the idea of the Heka L'Shem Ner Mitzvah, that when we light the Chanuka lights, we do something very special and different, that we're lighting them only for the purposes of Pirsumi Nissa, as we'll see later on, of publicizing the great miracle. And therefore, if you have no other light in the room, you require shamas. And if you've got a fire burning in the room and you're odom choshev, a person of status who wouldn't read by the firelight, then you require a shamas, another lamp, another light, in order to ensure that you won't benefit directly from the Chanuka lights. Source number 4. Omar of Yehuda Omar Rav Asi, says Rabbi Yehuda named Rav Asi, also lahartzos mois keneged Chanuka. I've deliberately highlighted in bold the words lahartzos keneged Chanuka for reasons you'll see presently. You're not allowed to count out money opposite the Chanuka lights. Ki amrisa kamedishmuel omali v'chiner kedush yishba. When says Rav Yehuda Rav Asi, when I said this over in front of Shmuel, he said back to me, but has the Chanuka lights got Kedusha? Interesting. I thought we just established the Chanuka lights have got Kedusha. And yet here you've got a challenge from Shmuel back to Rav Yehuda Rav Asi, that why can't you count out Chanuka? Why can't you have money in front of the Chanuka lights? Is there Kedusha attached to the Chanuka lights? So we're being taken back beyond the obvious statements with which we are so familiar from our practice nowadays, to ask the question, what is the Kedusha of the Chanuka lights? What is that holiness of the Chanuka lights? Maskit for Rav Yosef in source number 4 asks back on Shmuel, V'chi dam kedusha yesh bei? Does dam, blood, have kedusha attached to it? We're talking about the blood which flows from an animal after shechita, about which there is a din based on a pasuk in Achrei Mos, to sound v'shofach v'chisa. There's a din of kisui adam in Parshas Achrei Mos. If you shecht either a chaya, a wild animal, or an oif, or a bird, they require kisui adam. You have to take a little bit of earth and sprinkle it on the blood. And Kisei Adam is something which applies dafka to those two types of animals or birds, because they weren't necessarily brought as korbanos, but the domesticated animals, which could be brought as korbanos, some oifers could, some couldn't, but the domesticated animals, which could always be brought as korbanos, they didn't require Kisei Adam because they were used in the temple service, in the Avodah. So the Kisei Adam itself, how is this performed? This technical detail of covering the blood of either a bird or a wild animal, a kosher wild animal which has been shechted. So we learn out, the Gemara learns out in a brisa from this, that with that which you spilt the blood, you must cover the blood. You can't just kick dust over the blood that's been spilt from the animal that's been shechted, because that would be mitzvahs bezuyos salov. That mitzvahs shouldn't appear to be treated in a disrespectful, in a disdainful manner. And therefore, there needs to be a little bit more care taken. In the same way that you take care to shecht accurately with your hands, you must sprinkle the earth over the blood, a little bit of earth over the blood, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Kisei Adam. We don't do mitzvahs in an offhand, dismissive way. So here says Rav Yosef, this is a source for suggesting that Ner Chanukah should have a kedusha attached to it. You've lit this for the sake of publicizing the miracle. You don't then use those same self lights to start counting out your money or doing any other sort of activity which would impugn the kedusha, the sanctity which you have invested in these lights by kindling them for the purposes of Chanukah. So that's a source for the kedusha of Ner Chanukah. Now, in sources number 5 and 6, we go into an interesting question, which if you've listened carefully to source number 4 and source number 2, you will find a little bit of a question, because this Gemara, the source number 4, comes in Shabbos Chaf Beis. And the original source, which we said that also lishtamish la'ori, you're not allowed to have benefit from the light of the Torah, comes in Chaf Aleph and Beis. The question which in sources number 5 and 6, the run on the Rif, and the Rosh, two of the Rishonim whose glosses and halachic comments, early codification of halacha directly from the Gemara, are found at the back of every Shas, every Gemara. They come to address the following question: why do you need to tell me that I'm not allowed to count out money by the Chanukah lights, which we have in source number 4, when in source number 2 you've already told me also lishtamish la'ora, I'm not allowed to have benefit from the Chanukah lights? Why would I have thought that I can count out money by the Chanukah lights if you've already told me in general you're not allowed to have benefit from the Chanukah lights? So much so that we said an Odom Choshev, a person of status who's in a nice big room with a fire burning away, still needs a shamas, because he won't read by the firelight, he'll be reading by the light of the menorah, and therefore he needs a shamas. So it's clear you can't have benefit from the Chanukah lights. So why do you tell me, why does Rabbi Yehuda and Rasi need to come and tell me that I'm not allowed to count out money by the menorah? And there are 2 different approaches to answer this question, which also give us a further understanding of the halachic status of the sanctity of the Chanukah lights. So says the run on the Rif, also lishtamish la'ora, you can't have benefit from the Chanukah lights. Pirush kol tashmishin, that Gemara which we cited from Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, the source number 2, means any type of usage is prescribed. And afilu tashmish mitzvah, even if you've got a mitzvah, so you want to learn Torah by the Chanukah lights, you can't do that. We'll come back to the question of meditating and gazing on the Chanukah lights later on, as obviously permitted from the story we quoted from Rabbi Twersky in source number 1, and we'll come back to explain that later. But to have any usage of the Chanukah lights, even to daven by them, to learn Torah by them, you can't do that. Since the sages instituted the lighting of the menorah to mark the miracle of the oil, the miracle which occurred in the menorah of the holy temple itself, Asa'ua ki menorah, they made our menorahs like the menorah of the temple, ki'ilu, as if. She'ein mishtamshim b'klal. Nobody would think of going into the sanctuary of the temple and beginning to sort of read even Torah thoughts, read even Tzdav and Marif by the light of the menorah. The light of the menorah is sacred, it's hekdesh, it's designated for holy purposes. And likewise, our menorah, she'ein mishtamshim b'klal, when you light the menorah, you're lighting lights of sanctity. Says the Ran on the Rif, then the question we just raised. So why does Rav Asi need to tell us then that you're not allowed to count out money by the Chanukah lights? It's not that Rav Asi is coming to disagree with the statement of Rav Zera Amar Rav that you can't use the Chanukah lights at all. He agrees that you can't use them at all, even for Tashvish of Mitzvah. Avot Tashvish Mitzvah Shori, but I might have thought a Mitzvah usage is permitted. So why do I need to be told that additional statement, you can't even count that money? What Rav Asi is coming to add on to tell us extra over and above the original statement of Rav Zera Amar Rav is that even what we might describe as being a minimal usage. How long does it take to take a few coins out of your pockets and count them out by the Chanukah lights? A few moments. Even that is also. This seems to be the same approach that we find in the Yerushalmi and in the words of the Rambam in Hilchos Megillah v'Chanukah, that Rav Asi doesn't come to disagree with Rav. He comes to add on that never mind that you can't use the Chanukah lights on a regular basis to learn or to daven, or for any other purpose of mitzvah. It's coming to tell you that even a light, mundane purpose, which is just for a few seconds, you can't do it. It's like the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash itself. That's how special and holy the Chanukah lights that we kindle in Chanukah truly are. A second approach in resolving this question is evident in source number 6 on page 3. Omer of Yehuda, Omer of Asi. Also, the statement from Shabbos Chaf Beis, which is supplemental to the statement of the original statement of Rav Zera Amar Rav, as we explained previously, based on the teaching of the Ran on the Rif. Now we're looking at the Rosh, and he explains a different approach to answer this question. He asked the question explicitly. Even though we've had a ruling earlier that any type of usage is prohibited, that was Reb Zera Amar Rav. So why does Yehuda Amar Rav Asi come along and tell you, don't even stop to count out the coins in your pocket by the lights of the menorah? We require this. We require this other case of the counting out of money. Because I might have thought that when we said before, in the name of Rav Zera Amar Rav, in Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, that you're not allowed to benefit from the Chanukah lights, I might have thought that's a tashmish kavua. That's a regular, fixed type of usage. So to sit and to learn your daf yomi by the Chanukah lights, you can't do that. To take a half hour, sit by there and use the lights, no, you can't do that. And I might have thought, again, to daven Mariv, which is going to take a few minutes, and you're going to kavua, you're doing a regular basis, you can't do that. Why not? Not because of the idea of the menorah that we like today being comparable to the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash, like the Ran said. Different pshat. If I go past your house and see the lights burning and see you sitting at your table working away, Why has he got those lights on his house? Why has he got the lights on? This is something a person put the lights on in the house because they're reading, because they're working, because they're engaging in some sort of activity, and the lights are there to serve the purpose for in which they're engaged. But if I've lit the Chanukah lights, I don't want somebody to walk past and say, oh, you know why he's got that Chanukah light burning there? It's not for Chanukah. He's doing it because he's sitting at the table playing dreidel. He wants to play dreidel. He's doing it because he wants to learn the Parsha, because he wants to have a Mariv, because he's reading some book of interest. So it will start to cheapen the Chanukah mitzvah if I start using the Chanukah lights for anything other than displaying and publicizing the miracle. I'll begin to think that that's the reason he lit the lights. He didn't light the lights for Chanukah, he lit the lights for his benefits. To hold, I mean, as we said before, when it's forbidden in general to light, to have benefit from the Chanukah lights, I might have thought that if it's going to lead the onlooker astray, the person looking through the window will think, this isn't a Chanukah menorah, this is just light the person needs. Aval tashmish arai, but I might say if it comes to a casual usage, just for a few seconds, you're just counting out some money. Lozeh leidlika. No one is going to put on the lights just to count out the change in their pocket. The lights have been lit for Chanukah purposes, to publicize the miracle. And just when he's walking past, so he takes a few seconds to glance at the change he's got in his pocket. Ashmin and Rav Asi comes and says, oh no. That even a very light momentary usage, when it is something which carries disrespect. If you look the fourth line up in the English from the end of source number 6, Rav Asi comes to teach us that even an incidental but disrespectful such a usage, such as counting money, when one's hands are drawn up close to the light in order to carefully check the money, is prescribed. So we have, on the one hand, the instruction never to have benefit from the Chanukah lights. That's talking, says the Rosh, in the round, that we shouldn't begin to think that these lights have been lit for any purpose other than serving the publicizing of the miracle. But if it's just a very incidental, casual usage, I might think that's okay. No. Here we come again to the point of the bizui mitzvah, and that's why it says keneged ner Chanukah. If you do it opposite to the lights of Chanukah, right opposite, right close up to them, and lo kamosula houses moslo, it didn't say not allowed to count out money by its light, then you can't do that either. Now, what's the nafkamina? What's the difference between the Rosh and the Ran? Well, first of all, the Ran says that the menorah is like the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. That's how the sages instituted. We should view it being like the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, you can't do anything by those Chanukah lights. The Rosh leaves, please excuse the pun, it's intentional, a tiny chink of light open. The door is open a tiny bit for a secular or ordinary usage of the Chanukah lights. Why? The Rosh says that we don't want to use the Chanukah lights in an oifen kavua, tashmish kavua, for something which is fixed. So you can't daven, you can't learn Torah by the Chanukah lights. He says you cannot use it for a tashmish kal, for a lighter purpose, for an incidental purpose, if it is what he describes as being something which is a tashmish arai shel ganai. It's something which is an incidental usage, which is also disrespectful. Counting out money, going right up close to the Chanukah lights and counting out money by those lights is also prescribed. But it would seem that the Rosh might permit using the lights from the casually for a non-disrespectful purpose. So if you use it just from a distance and use it casually, so there's no contradiction to the principle of having lit the Chanukah lights for the purpose of the Chanukah lights themselves, and you're not doing it in a disrespectful way by sort of belittling the lights by coming right up close to them and then using it to check your money or whatever else you might be doing, there is a possibility of saying that the menorah will be that it will be permitted to use the menorah in that way. So I'm not saying la halacha the Rosh would be mati that, but I'm just drawing together the strands of what the Rosh and the Ran are saying on the usage of Chanukah lights with the extra statement of Yehuda Amar Ravasi. But both of them tell us just how special the Kedusha of the Chanukah lights are. According to the Ran, even more so, because he's saying that the Chanukah lights are actually me'ain, like Ki'ilu, the lights of the Beis HaMikdash. And according to the Rosh, the fact that you've got to be careful, even if we might permit you a very incidental usage of the Chanukah lights, but not in any way that will be bizui mitzvah, as we saw in the earlier source from the Gemara, like the limud from Kisrei Adam, Shelo Yehi Mitzvahs B'Zuyos Lov, both according to the Rosh and the Ran, you need to be careful not to treat this mitzvah in any way in a disrespectful manner. Now, having learned something about the Kedusha of Ner Chanukah, and having learned about it being used only for the mitzvah Ner Chanukah, in source number 7, we come on to another fascinating discussion between the first two sources in Shabbos Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph and Chaf Beis Amud Beis. On Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, there's a very interesting question. Itma, Rav Oma Ein Madlikin Minei L'Ner u'Shmuel Madlikin. An interesting dispute between Rav and Shmuel. Can you light one Chanukah light from another Chanukah light? So let's say it's the third night of Chanukah. You've lit your first Chanukah light. Your shamas goes out and it won't relight for some reason or another. You've finished the end of the candle that you've been using to light it with. So you think, can I light my second and third lights from the third light directly? That's what the Shai seems to be. Yosef Homer Rabbanan Kamed Rav Ada Ba'ava. One of the rabbis was sitting in front of Rav Ada Ba'ava. The Yosef V'Ka'ama, and he said that the reason of Rav, who says Ein Madlikin Minei L'Ner, you're not allowed to light from one lamp to another, is Mishum Bizui Mitzvah. Is because again this would show disrespect, disdain for mitzvah. Rashi explains in the brackets in source number 7, Mishum Bizui Mitzvah. Why is it considered to be bizui mitzvah, disrespecting the mitzvah? Because how would you light one light from another light? To shemadli kisim she'ino min mitzvah, you would take a match or a splinter of wood, and you would light that from the first Chanukah light, miner mitzvah, umimenu madli kasha, and with that splinter you would light the other lights. Says Rashi's understanding tells us therefore that it's a bizui mitzvah to light even an intermediary shamas, to light the shamas from the Chanukah lights is also osa, because you're transferring the sanctity of the Chanukah lights onto a mundane piece of wood, which then lights other Chanukah lights. That you can't do, according to Rav. Omar lehu. So Rav Ada Ba'ava said back, Loi tatzitzulei, don't listen to this explanation of Rav that's just been given. Don't say that the explanation that the rabbi gave in front of Ada Ba'ava is mishum bizui mitzvah. It's not because of disrespecting the mitzvah that you can't light one Chanukah light from another. Tami de Rav mishum tekom makchish mitzvah. The reason of Rav is an even more delicate, more subtle issue. Tekom makchish mitzvah. The concern is that you're depleting the mitzvah in some way. And in brackets, Rashi explains, the mercy commander shokil nohira, v'shoiv ktsas milach luchis shamnoi. It looks as if what you're doing is you're taking a little bit of light, and in doing so, you're drawing off a little moisture from the oil, and therefore you have in an infinitesimally small manner, reduce the amount of oil in one lamp in order to kindle the other lamp. My beinayu. So just like before, I showed you a possible difference between the Rosh and the Ran's pshatim in sources number 5 and 6. The Gemara itself asks, what's the difference between the two reasons that to prohibit you lighting one Chanukah light from another? Ika beinayu de komadlik mishraga l'shraga. If it's possible to light directly from one light to another light, that's when you will see the difference between these two reasons. Because man on mishum bizui mitzvah, mishraga l'shraga madlik. According to the opinion that the concern is disrespecting the mitzvah, if you light directly from one Chanuka lamp to another, there's no disrespecting the mitzvah. I've gone from one lamp to another lamp, and I've lit the lights. I haven't brought into the equation a mundane piece of wood, which I've, if you like, disrespected the lights by kindling a splinter of wood from the Chanuka light, and then it's an ordinary light, and then it lights a Chanuka light. That's I haven't done if I light directly from one lamp to the next without an intermediary splinter. But mando mishumi chushi mitzvah mishraga l'shraga nami also. But if I'm going to light from one lamp directly to another, and my concern is a minimal but nevertheless tangible depletion of the oil of one lamp in order to light another lamp, that I can't do. Interesting, halacha lemaisa, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you can light directly one Chanuka lamp from another, but advises it's better not to do so. So that's perhaps taking account of both views. That mishum bizui mitzvah, because disrespecting the mitzvah, you wouldn't be doing it. You wouldn't be disrespecting the mitzvah, and therefore it should be possible to light one light directly from another. But to the second opinion, which says depleting the mitzvah, that might be a concern, and therefore, although technically it should be permitted to light one light directly from another, we always use the shamas, and the lights themselves remain with their sanctity and integrity intact, and you don't light one from the other. Now, in source number 8, we come to another question which illustrates to us the importance of Ner Chanukah, and a beautiful theme that we're going to come back to right at the end of the Shir in terms of understanding the ultimate purpose of these holy Chanukah lights, of the level of sanctity and holiness and goodness which the lights are supposed to restore to us. Omar Rava, says Rava, Pshitali, and we're going to see about 3 particular mitzvahs which are struggling for priority here. Ner Beisav and Ner Chanukah, if you've got a choice on Friday afternoon. Nebuch, no one should be in this position ever, but you've got a choice. You're so limited with your material resources, you can either light your Shabbos lights or light your Chanukah lights. Ner Beisav Odif. So the lighting the Shabbos lights is the number 1 priority, Mishum Shalom Bayis, because you've got to be able to have a home on Shabbos, an atmosphere which is one of peace, tranquility, that the spirit of Shabbos should be alive and well in the home. And therefore your number 1 priority is Ner Beisai. Lighting Shabbos lights comes even ahead of the priority of lighting Chanukah lights. Even though they're Persumi Nisa, you can't start to publicize a miracle till your base is secure. This is one of the mistakes that are unfortunately made by certain secular Jewish organizations who think they represent the Jewish people because we're all about image. There's no point. You can't have Jewish image without Jewish substance. And that's one of perhaps the underlying philosophical bases for saying that Ner Shabbos comes before Ner Chanukah. There's no point trying to tell the world out there, look how great Judaism is, and it's a shallow, empty, hollow experience on the inside. You've got to start from the basis of Shalom Bayis. You haven't got that, you haven't got anything. Ner Beisav v'Kiddush Hayoim, Ner Beisav Odif. If you've got a choice between Shabbos candles and Kiddush, wine for Kiddush, again, Ner Beisav Odif Mishum Shalom Beisai. This is preferable because of Shalom Bayis, and indeed there's a source, Rashi quotes here from Posuk in Eichov Atiznach Misholom Nafshi, that my soul despaired of having peace. That's because Hoshivani Machashakim, I was forced to sit in darkness, and light represents the capacity to have peace, to have a sense of well-being and security. B'nei Beisim Mitzran Leish B'Choshech, people would be upset, would be pained to sit in darkness. Boy, Rava. So Rava now asks the question of this trilogy which we haven't yet resolved. What about Ner Chanukah and Kiddush Hayom Mahu? If I've got a choice between Ner Chanukah and Kiddush Hayom. Maybe Kiddush Hayom Odif de Todir. Maybe Kiddush Hayom comes first, has priority over the Chanukah lights, because that's what we do on a regular basis. Dilma Ner Chanukah, Odif Mishum Pusuminissa, maybe Ner Chanukah is preferable because of publicizing the miracle. After he raised the question between Ner Chanukah and Kiddush, what's more important? He says Ner Chanukah Odif. Ner Chanukah gets priority over Kiddush Mishum Pusuminissa. So our order is Shabbos lights, Chanukah lights, Kiddush, as far as these three elements are concerned. Now, the Gemara continues here, Chaf Gimel and base. Omar Rav Huna said, Harogil B'ner. Even though we've said Shabbos lights first, and then Chanukah lights, and then Kiddush, and we've explained the reason is because both are Midivrei Sofrim. We'll see in a moment in the source a little bit later on. That's both Kiddush Hayom and Ner Chanukah are equivalent mitzvahs because they're both drabonon mitzvahs as such. Nevertheless, Ner Chanukah it has priority because it's Pisumi Nisa. So we say, the Gemara goes on to say that the Neiros, the person who is diligent and consistent in lighting lights, will have children who are Torah scholars. And Rashi explains based on the Pasuk of Mishlei, the end of source number 8, Kineh mitzvah Torah oir, that the mitzvah is light, and the mitzvah provides a lamp, and Torah provides light. Al yedei ner mitzvah the Shabbos for Chanukah, through the diligence, the consistency of lighting the Shabbos lights and Chanukah lights, ba'or Torah, the substantive base of the Shabbos lights, together the Pirsumei Nisa of the Chanukah lights, that brings to the Oir of Torah. Now let's turn over onto page 4, and we go to source number 9, which is the Rambam in Hilchos Chanukah, the end of Perek Dalet. And the Rambam puts it most beautifully, drawing together some of the strands of that which we've already covered from the original Gemaras. Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad moed. The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is a very precious mitzvah. A person needs to be careful about it. Kedei lo yidea hanes, to make known the miracle of the lights, to add the praise of God and thanksgiving to Him for the miracles He did for us. Even a person that have what to eat, he subsists on charitable handouts. He has to either borrow or even sell a garment to take oil and to be able to have the wicks and the lights to light the Chanukah lights. The question we just asked in the Gemara Shabbos Chaf Gimel, if he has literally one coin and he's got a choice between Kiddush Yom and Hadlokus Ner Chanukah, between making Kiddush or lighting Chanukah light, he gives priority to the Chanukah lights over making Kiddush. And this is the point I made in explaining source number 8 before. Since both of them have a rabbinic origin, they were both lighting Shabbos lights, although it's a source in the Torah of Kiddush, and there's a source in the Torah of Leisosor to the Chanukah lights as well. That's why we can make the bracha, Shekichon of Mitzvot, who sanctify with His commandments. Nevertheless, you give priority therefore to Ner Chanukah, because it reminds us of the miracle. If you've got Ner Beis or Ner Chanukah, Ner Beis or Kiddush Hayom, again he makes the point that's based on the Gemara. If you've got a choice between Shabbos lights and Chanukah or Kiddush Hayom, Ner Beis or Kiddush Mishum Shalom Bayis. Now he adds on something beautiful here. Why is Shalom Bayis the substrate of the mitzvahs of Ner Chanukah and of Kiddush as well? In the parsha of Sota, we learn out that the divine name can be erased to bring peace between a husband and wife. God la shalom shekol haTorah nitna la'asos shalom. Greatest peace because the Torah is given to make peace in the world. It says its ways are the ways of pleasantness and all its pathways are those of peace. I actually thought about this in my Amida this morning in Sim Shalom. I went in the last bracha of the Amida, which is all about peace, and we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Barucheinu Avinu Kolonu Ke'echo Ba'or Panecha, Ki Va'or Panecha Nosata Lanu, Teras Chaim Ba'avas Chesed, etc., etc. The connection between Oir and Shalom is there at the very summation of our prayer at the conclusion of Shemona Esrei. This idea of Or leading to Shalom, which the Rambam brings here, is such a fundamental concept, and something else about the enduring nature of the inspiration of the Chanukah lights. The Chanukah lights, when we look and gaze upon them, we should be dreaming of peace for our generation and future generations, for every good thing, as Rabbi Twersky said in that original quote. So I find that Rambam quite emotional almost in terms of drawing together the strands of the Gemara we saw before. Now, in source number 10, we really are doing quite a lot of groundwork in terms of Hilchos Chanukah this morning. Source number 10, we come onto the brachas that are made when lighting the menorah, and an interesting insight here. Hamadlik belel rishon v'rech shalosh brachos. When you light the Chanukah lights on the first night, you make 3 brachos. Lahadlik ner Chanukah. Look at that carefully. Different to our bracha, isn't it? We say lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. We'll explain this later. The Mechaba actually says lahadlik ner Chanukah, and the Arizal put that into his Siddur, and you'll find that in certain Nusach Sfard and Chabad to this day, they make the bracha lahadlik ner Chanukah. We say ner shel Chanukah according to the Ashkenazi Sheptoskim, but we'll come and understand this a little bit more. Why should it be in difference? Why is it lahadlik ner Chanukah rather than lahadlik ner shel Chanukah according to the Mechaba? She'asa nisim shechionu. If you didn't make the Shechion the first night, on the second night when you remember. From the after the first night onwards, you make 2 brachas. Says Hagar, the Ramah says, all the brachas should be made before you begin to light, because you always make brachas over lasiyosin. Another interesting little point you may want to think of, you should make the brachas, light the first light on the first night when you got the first night. After you've lit the first light, when you continue lighting through the rest of Chanukah, you should say Haneres Halolo at that time as you're lighting the other lights. Beautiful idea. So as you're lighting the other lights, and you always light the newest light first, so you're lighting left to right rather than right to left. You always light the newest light each night. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what happens if you lit the Ner Chanukah and you forgot to make the bracha over lighting it? Only before he lights, before he finishes all lighting all of them, he remembers he hasn't made the bracha. Yesh levarach kol brachos, he says, based on Shuvas Rabbi Kiva Eiger, you can make the bracha if you've got the third night of Chanukah, you've lit your first light. How did I do that? I didn't make the brachas. So you can make the brachas before lighting the next 2 lights. He says that in Nizkel Achashidlik Kulam, if you remember after lighting all of them, Ein lo levarach brachos lahadlik. You shouldn't make the bracha lahadlik because you've done it already and the mitzvah is fulfilled, and you can't make a bracha after doing the mitzvah itself. So don't make the bracha lahadlik if on the first night you've lit your light, or subsequent lights you've lit all your lights and you haven't made the bracha. You can't make bracha lahadlik, but you can make the bracha she'asanisim. If you haven't made the bracha she'chon, you can make that. The Sharat Sion there says a fascinating insight into the Pesach of Rabbi Kiva Eiger. Why did Rabbi Kiva Eiger, who the Mishnah Berurah Paskin's halacha we follow, say that you can light your Chanukah lights and you've forgotten the bracha and you can still make she'as nisim and if necessary she'chionu? There's a fascinating halacha. If you won't have an opportunity to light your own Chanukah lights, you may say the bracha she'as nisim when you see somebody else's Chanukah lights. So I'm walking past somebody's house, I see his Chanukah lights. I never have, for some reason or another, haven't got a home to go to and haven't got anywhere to light lights. I can stand outside my neighbor's house and I can say she'as as she'as nisim and even she'chionu if required. This is a fascinating halacha which requires a little bit more explanation. I mean, other mitzvahs, if I see someone shaking a lulav, can I make a bracha? Because I've seen someone else doing a mitzvah of lulav. If I see someone putting on tefillin, can I make a bracha on that? Even Shabbos candles. I see a woman lighting a Shabbos candle. Can I make a bracha because she's lit a Shabbos candle? This is a unique thing by Ner Chanukah. And in source number 11, we'll see the halacha taught explicitly. Mi shaloi hidlik, someone who hasn't lit Chanukah lights, ve'eino osud ladlik b'os halayla, and he's not going to do so that night. V'gamei madlikin alov b'veisoi, and also no one's lighting for him at home. So he hasn't lit, he's not going to light, and no one's lighting at home. When he sees somebody else's Chanukah lights, he can make the bracha Shenosim. Uvelel Rishon, the first night or the first time he sees them, he makes the bracha Shechiyonu. And if on a second or third or subsequent night of Chanukah he's got an opportunity to light his Chanukah lights, doesn't go back and make Shechiyonu once again. Source number 12, page 5. We now come on to a fascinating Tosfos in Sukkah Memvov who answers the question I posed to you just before. And that is the question of why there's a unique possibility to make the brachos she'osanisim, maybe she'echiyonu, but certainly she'osanisim, on somebody else's Chanukah lights just because I have seen the Chanukah lights. Tosfos, in source number 12, asks explicitly, with other mitzvahs like sukkah and lulav, as I said, with somebody else putting on tefillin, someone lighting Shabbos lights, they never made an enactment to say that you've got to be able to make a bracha on seeing the mitzvah being performed. Ela gabi ner Chanukah, only by ner Chanukah. Tosfos gives 3 answers. Number 1, mishum chavivus hanes. Because the Pirsumei Nisa, the miracle is so special, so therefore we have a possibility of making a bracha as a roya, as one who sees the Ner Chanukah. Gam mishum sheyesh kam bnei adam she'ein lehem batim nebuch. There are people who are homeless. Maybe perhaps not quite so prevalent in our day. We hope and pray, but in days gone by, certainly people nebuch, vagrants. They didn't have homes to go to. Ve'ein liyodem l'kayim mitzvah. They can't fulfill the mitzvah. Says Tosfos, that second reason isn't so great. Tam Rishon Nicha, I think the first reason of Chavivus Mitzvah is better. Delay Tikshlei Mezuzah, because you might ask a question, then I should be able to make a bracha when I see somebody else's mezuzah if I haven't got my own home, Nebuch. So I should make a bracha on seeing a mezuzah because I haven't got my own home to walk into, which has got mezuzahs. And then Tosfos says the third reason. Oid yesh lefarish de'in shayach l'sakin l'rei bracha she'ena oisem avorich. Tosfos is a fascinating thing. It's not possible to institute a bracha on re'iyah, on seeing Ner Chanukah, or on seeing other items. Ner Chanukah, we do it. Other mitzvahs, when seeing them, you can't make a bracha that the person who does the mitzvah himself doesn't make. Because we make a bracha she'osa nisim, when we light, that gives the possibility for the roya, for one who sees the menorah, to make a bracha just on the seeing of the menorah uniquely. There's no other mitzvah where we've got a bracha she'osa nisim for the re'iyah as opposed to the hadloka, which is fascinating. Understanding Rabbi Kiva Eger earlier, who said that if you didn't make the brachos when you were lighting and forgot to do it until after the completion of the lighting, you can make she'osa nisim but not the hadlik. It's almost like with Ner Chanukah and the Pirsumei Nisa and the special nature of these holy Chanukah lights, the inspiration, that Chazal instituted 2 forms of brachas. One is like a bracha for the hadloka, for the lighting, and one is the bracha for seeing the lights. And that's why you say she'osa nisim when you light, because that's when you actually bring the mitzvah together, but also you say she'osa nisim if you just see the Chanukah lights, if you don't have a chance to make your own bracha on your own menorah, either at home or someone else doing it for you at home. Now, source number 13, we come on to a beautiful idea from the Sefer Tamei HaMinhagim, who tells us that Tam de Chanukah nusach habrochu lehadlik ner Chanukah. The nusach I said to you before, point out Shulchan Aruch says what we do not do. We say lahadlik ner shel Chanukah like we say lahadlik ner shel Shabbos. But there was a strong havamina which was paskand ruled la halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, and is also brought down in other nuschos to say a different bracha on lighting the Chanukah lights, slightly adapted bracha lahadlik ner Chanukah rather than lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Overlel Shabbos, yet on Friday night the nusach is clearly, and on Yom Tov, lahadlik ner shel Shabbos, lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov, shall you put in? So, because Ner Chanukah also ishtamish l'oira. Ner Chanukah, as we've established in the earlier part of the shir, you cannot benefit from the Chanukah lights. Ulezelma Ner Chanukah, and that's why it says Ner Chanukah. Loris ki haner einu kim lemitzvos Chanukah. This is a ner I'm lighting, a candle, a lamp I'm kindling just for Chanukah purposes. It is Ner Chanukah, the Ner Chanukah. It's not anything else. Masha Enke Ner Shabbos, when it comes to lights, the Shabbos lights, Hakavona Ner Shon Mishtamshim Bay, it's a light which we can have benefit from. We can use the whole purpose, as we saw before, the Rambam Paskins, the Gemara, which says that Ner Shabbos has got priority, is to bring Shalom Bayis. You should have benefit from the light. It says the Shabbos lights should be lit near the table so that they increase light and festivity and brightness to your Shabbos meal. And its lamp burns for our benefit. This light from which we are benefiting is the light of Shabbos. It's the Shabbos light from which we have benefit, whereas Ner is Ner Chanukah alone. In source number 14, we take it even further. And now we're getting in the last two sources into the very innards of that which Rabbi Twersky quoted about his late saintly great-grandfather, the first Rebbe of Bobov. The Sefer Ben Yisoskel Kos V'Shem Rav Tzadik HaKodesh Moreno Rav Pinchas Mikoritz. Pinchas Mikoritz, one of the famous early Hasidic masters. Shebechol Chanukah b'shas hadlokas hanerus. Every Chanukah, when we light the Chanukah lights, misgale or hagonus, the hidden light is revealed. This is quite mystical. V'u oiroi shel melech haMashiach. That is the very light and the source of the arrival of the light of the Messiah, of Mashiach himself. That's an unbelievable thought when you gaze upon your Chanukah lights, that you're drawing in from those lights a light which is me'ain, which is a reflection, which is something like, not just as the Ran says on the Rif, that it's like the menorah in the temple of old as the sages instituted, but the light you're getting there is messianic light. Of the Sefer Zerakodesh L'Chanukah quotes further, this is all from the Sefer Tamei HaMinhagim. In his footnotes, he quotes the Zerakodesh L'Chanukah, Kosav, Kamoshe Reitzon L'Chaped Dova Agonus. If you want to seek out something which is hidden, Mechapsim B'nei, you seek it out with a light, with a lamp, with a candle, like we do Erev Pesach. He'll quote that example from the beginning of Sech Psochim. Kamoshe Kosav, as the Posuk says in Sefania, Achapes Yerushalayim Baneros, I will search out Yerushalayim with candles. And it's Chazal saying, they say in the tractate of Pesachim, you want to search Erla Bossa also on the night of the 14th day of Nisan. We search out by the light of the candle. Kain al yedei ha'er de Chanukah mechapsin hirosa yisprach shemai. The Chanukah lights are something by which we can seek out reverence or fear of the divine. Reishis chochma yiras Hashem, says Shlomo Melech. The very foundation, the very fundamental point, substance of the Chanukah lights. Yes, Shalom Bayis transcends. Sim Shalom, ki v'or panech u'mostato lonu, as we said before, that the fundamental light is that of Shalom Bayis. But the Pirsume Nisa, the Chanukah lights that we kindle, we're looking at the enduring inspiration of the Chanukah lights, represents Oyer Shel Mashiach, represents the Oyer of the Beis HaMikdash itself, represents the Oyer HaGonus, represents all of past inspiration for the here and now. And as Rabbi Twersky said in the first quote I brought to you from his book, Generation, projecting forwards, that your children should have good children and your children's children should be good children, and the meditation. If you have a look in for example, the art scroll on Chanukah, it's got a list of no less than 7 different Tehillim, which are appropriate to be said at the time when you light the Chanukah lights. And you don't just sing Moaz Sur and there is Halolu and get out the donuts and the dreidel and sort of just have a good time together. Yeah, you can do that as well. Family time is also important on Chanukah. But remember, take something in from these Chanukah lights. And therefore, I conclude with one final quote from Rabbi Twersky, source number 16. After Father lit the Chanukah candles, he would sit and observe them for half an hour while chanting some of the psalms with a melody reserved for Chanukah. The gifts that I received as a child on Chanukah have long since returned to the elements. I cannot recall a single toy I received on Chanukah, but I can still relive the candle making, and when really relaxed in reverie, I can even smell the melted beeswax. I can see myself sitting on Father's lap and watching the Chanukah lights glow. The miracle of Chanuka was the tiny bit of oil lasted for 8 days. An even greater miracle is that the glow of Father's Chanuka lights has lasted for 5 decades. I hope and pray that this particular Shir, Erev Chanuka, should be one which should encourage all of us in drawing from the Chanuka flames, which are Kodeshem, not to be used even the most incidental of ways, according to the explanations of the Ran on the Rif and the Rosh, as we've seen during the course of the Shir. The enduring inspiration of the Chanuka lights should lift our spirits at this particular time when we are so challenged by our experiences of the last several months, should lift us onto a higher plane of consciousness, of devekus, of connection to the Almighty, that we should be able to achieve that sim shalom, that peace within ourselves, within our families, within our world. Ki v'or panecho, for the light of the divine countenance, the or agonos, that hidden light which represents the or Mashiach, that fullest potential which we should draw out for ourselves in the here and now, transmit to children and children's children, should be manifest amongst us. And that, I believe, will give a huge extra lift, boost, and dimension to our observance of Chanukah and to the lifting of the levels of Klal Yisrael by Yom HaMahim Bazman Hazeh. I would just conclude with one very final thought. I've been privileged on various occasions to be in Israel on Chanukah, and when you go past the Knesset, you see emblazoned there on the top the legend by Yom HaMahim Bazman Hazeh, those days at this very time, drawing on the inspiration example of how our people have so many times lifted ourselves up from the darkness, like we say in Lechododi on Friday night, that his oiri, awaken yourself, arise, dust yourselves down, cling to that light. Chanukah is the special time in the year to do that.